Hi, Eagles fans. Welcome to New Mexico Eagles Chat. Kind of an exciting game last night. I'm just now getting around to posting a recap. When you live out here, you don't get, the local channel, so I have to follow along on WIP online and um, wait until all the YouTube videos come out showing highlights, things like that. So, kind of a rundown of the game. Everybody is high on Tanner McKee. Seems to have played super, super well. Um, that has led to some discussion I've seen on WIP's Twitter sites, things like that, that some fans are saying, hey, what if somebody wants to trade for him? Think that's a mistake. um, I would keep Tanner McKee around. We're making a Super Bowl run this year. You got to keep him, just in case Hurts gets injured. Since Hurts does like to run, we don't want another concussion like we saw against Washington last year. Fortunately, the Eagles, clinched the division. He was able to sit out a couple weeks, which certainly helped. But um, I think that, we got to keep McKee around. However, to just kind of play along with the discussions of what's McKee worth, since the Eagles didn't appear to have any viable backup last night with McCord or DTR. I know I've said on this channel that I'm kind of a DTR fan, but, things did not look good last night from what I saw in the highlights and what I could overhear, listening to the game on WIP. So what I would say is if the Eagles were to trade him, they'd have to get a veteran backup back from the team, um, or somebody that they could bring in and develop. I could see a phone call coming from Shane Steichen because what I saw at the Colts last night, Richardson and Daniel Jones did not look that great. Um, And, right now New Orleans is looking at either starting a second year guy in Rattler or, a rookie in Chuck. So those are kind of the two places that I could see him landing at, or if they don't land there um, this year or next year. But I really think Howie would not be well to trade him right now. Especially like I said, the Eagles want to make another Super Bowl run. They want to repeat. Um, but speaking of Howie, was it a mistake for him to let Slay go to Pittsburgh? Um, that's sort of, what I saw of Kylie Ringo in the highlights. I mean, granted, he was covering Lamar Chase, but I didn't see anything out of the corners or be able to hear, Merrill Reeves and Mike Quick talk anything positive about cornerback play with the Eagles' second team defense, especially those guys, Adoree Jackson and Kylie Ringo, trying to um, win that second cornerback job. So we'll have to see what Bennett does once he gets here, gets into the flow, see how the second preseason game goes. Some teams are playing more and more starters. So I hopefully, we'll get a better feel for that second cornerback position. The other thing that's come up is what happens if none of these guys look viable. I really see DeJean moving up into that corner position and Sidney Brown going back to safety until Makuba, takes over at safety. So I I think the depth is there to make some adjustments. But right now, wish we had Darius Slay back. Not that Slay would have been playing last night anyway because he would have been a starter, but that is something to consider. The other thing is, Smith and Wilson and Cooper seem to sew up those, last three wide receiver spots. Um, I they looked exceptional. I mean, McKee played great against the Bengals starting defense. So that definitely helped, especially when Wilson was in the game. I thought Smith was really good from what I saw in the highlights, from what I could hear, Mike Quick talking about, Merrill Reese talking, and then Darius Cooper. Everybody's talking about him today in the game that he had. Um, some of them didn't know where Tarleton State was. When you live out here in the Southwest, I was aware of Tarleton State. They played the University of New Mexico in football a couple times. And Stevensville, Texas. Everybody was like, "What the heck is Stevensville, Texas?" Um, Joel actually had a song a few years ago called Stevensville. So it's been in the media, it's been out there in the entertainment world for some time. But it's really great. It was great to see him have excel while he had his opportunity, and I really, really think that that's something to take into consideration. As far as defense, once Burrow and Chase and Higgins were out of the game, it kind of looked like the Eagles defense settled in. Um, One of the things that I heard a lot of talk about today was, the Bengals rookie defensive end. He looked great, but when all the highlights that were shown on ESPN and places, it said, "Hey, he looked great," looked like they were Eagles' backup offensive linemen. So it's hard to say he would look that great if Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata were in the game. Um, so that takes me, to some other things that were driving me crazy this morning because I was like, oh man, people got to be talking about McKee. People got to be talking about McKee. And everything was about Burrow and how great he looked against the second team and third team defense. I mean, granted, Burrow's great, Chase is great. You know, I we get a lot of LSU football out here. And so, I watched Burrow and Chase and Jefferson for eons. Still a little perturbed at Howie for not taking Jefferson, but then who knows, maybe we wouldn't have Devonta Smith now. But I really see, there's some reasons there that they wanted to make the Chiefs look good. But then they talked about the Chiefs defense, not the Chiefs, the Bengals defense. And then they never really talked about the fact that these were the Eagles' second team that was driving on them drive after drive. Um, so my big takeaways from last night, some of the things I wanted to see was how good was McKee? Great. Um, AJ Dillon played great. Um, Shipley, great. Like I said before on this channel, I'm a Shipley fan, so I was happy to see him play well. Um, and it looked like all the backs were doing well. The kid from Virginia Tech, um, I think he's got a future, pal. It may not be with the Eagles, but he certainly looked like he was in the process of earning that fourth running back position. So I think things look really good there for the Eagles. It looks like the running game is going to be intact. One of the things I'm curious about is Patullo. What do you guys think of Patullo and how he called the game? For me, it looked like the Eagles are probably going to pass a little bit more than they did last year, but I could see that, Barkley can't have 500 touches again, this year. So if he does, we're looking at him being gone probably in a couple of years. So that seems to be the trend with these backs that get 2,000 yards. If they come close to that again, it's usually kind of curtains for their career after a couple of years of that workload. So I can see a lot more passing happening. I can see a little more running happening, but I also see if Barkley does get close to 2,000, some of that's going to be some really long runs again, just like we saw last year. Defensively, it was hard to say anything. Campbell, by all accounts, looked really good. Showed a lot of leadership when he was on the field. Trotter Jr. had a great game, was pretty solid, pretty steady throughout. What I've seen out of the defensive line on the video, it looked like they were getting some pressure on Burrow. So, hey, I think the rotation will still work. And I'm sure Vic can make some adjustments in the future. But I do leave that game with a lot of concerns about the Eagles' ability to cover in that second cornerback position. So it'll be interesting to see next week, and kind of see how they line up and how that goes, against another team starter. So kind of looking forward to that. This was a really good way to get started in the preseason. Excuse me. We always want to start off with a win, and I think starting off with a win looked good, especially as good as the offense looked, because that was always the question mark. New play caller. What was the offense? Big injury updates. Looks like Elijah Cooks, I wanted to just confirm that is supposed to get an MRI today, so we'll be waiting for the results of that, see how that turns out. And the other big injury was the Kenyon Green. He was brought in. I know that he had some struggles down with the Texans. Sounds like he was carted off. Looks like a shoulder injury for him as well. Um, but so we'll have to see how well that CJ Gardner Johnson trade works out. But again, Green has a history of injuries, so it's kind of were we expecting this? Or were we truly expecting him to have a great season, after coming out of Stoutland University and being able to play well for the Birds? I did see Pryor in the game. He did look like he got beat on a couple plays, so a little bit of concern there. But I think the Eagle offensive line still has a little ways to go, especially in the backups. The starting five, of course, is pretty good. Steen sounds like he had a really good game from what I've been hearing, and that's good news. So I think the Birds offense is going to be in good shape. Patullo, looks like he's going to be a good play caller, except, we don't, again, it'll be a little bit different once we get to the regular season and open up against the Cowboys on the 4th, but which is, a month away right now. So I think we'll know a little bit more about that then, but it looks like a little more passing, a little less running. I think some of that's going to be to save Saquon's health. I think getting AJ Dillon in the game, big power back. Merrill Reese made an interesting comparison last night. Merrill Reese was comparing AJ Dillon to Garrett Blunt. I can see that comparison. He kind of ran like that when he was in Green Bay, but it looks like he's come back from that neck injury pretty good shape. Like I said, Shipley ripped off a long one. Wish he was a little faster. He's got some breakaway speed, but I think that he's got some stuff coming, um, and I think he's going to be a good backup. And then, like I said, Powell is looks like he's going to be maybe that fourth guy. Van Sumeren, we know he's going to be there to block. So I think there's a lot of positives for the offense. The defense being a little bit leaky. I don't put a lot of stock in the second team starter, playing starters as the second team. But again, it will be nice when we see the actual starting defense on the field, and maybe that would be something good for that third preseason game against the Jets. Just kind of get everybody in there, get them acclimated, let the fans see what the defense is going to look like before they play Dallas on September 4th. So that's kind of my recap of last night's game. I think there's some things to work on, especially offensively, especially DTR McCord, who's going to be that number 3 guy. And then who's going to end up as that emergency quarterback as the 4th guy on practice squad, but who knows? Eagles may carry 3 on the roster and then that 4th one on the practice squad. But what I'm seeing, last night, I was not impressed by either person, but McCord's a rookie, first time in an NFL game, and he's playing against third and fourth stringers with third and fourth stringers. So let's give the defense a little bit of a waiver for this week, and the offense still looks like it's going to click this year, and hopefully we can put up 34 points a game as an offense with that defense, pitching some shutouts or some low scoring games. So I hope you all have a great day. Try to get some rest, and we'll try to get another update on here as soon as we can. Also, if you like the video, don't hit subscribe, and hopefully I can keep you up to date with the perspective of someone who lives in the Southwest. Have a great day.